paying closer attention to the geopolitical games at this moment, and there's no surprise that we dare to use the word complication or intricacy. On one hand, across the continent, global citizens are trying to figure out this economic agenda, especially among these competitors. For example, this active competition between US and China. And on the other hand, people are also concerned about this political intensity. And again, we're looking at the war between US and Iran at this moment. It looks like in the year of 2026, and we already started with a lot of uncertainties at this moment. But putting things together, it's not about the complication of the politics. It's not about the complication of the economic agenda. It's more about relationship at this moment. For example, paying a closer attention to the sitting US President Donald Trump at this moment, not only that he's willing to make deals with foes and with allies and whatever you want to call it, but also within his social circle, he's been gaining more momentum and also gaining more positivity with a lot of donors and the wealthy and billionaires, etc. Of course, this is very concerning not only domestically, but also internationally. Is the country heading towards authoritarianism at this moment? And also, what about the so-called oligarchs? Are they going to manipulate the political and also this economic system and so that it could only benefit but challenge the status quo at this moment? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker, who's the Dr. Christopher Hartwell. Dr. Hartwell is the professor of international business policy and the head of the International Management Institute at the Zurich University of Applied Sciences School of Management and Law and a professor at Kosminski University. Well, Dr. Hartwell, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Will.
Well, again, Dr. Hartwell, such an honor to have you on the show. As I mentioned before, initially when I discovered you, because of this amazing article that you wrote or you co-authored, which is entitled The Disposable Oligarchs, Why Wealthy Elites Come to Regret Their Bargains with Authoritarians. So, Dr. Hartwell, again, as we mentioned before, when we look at this political competition, we look at this economic intensity around the world, one thing it's so concerning, it's regarding the concept of oligarchs at this moment. I think for a lot of us, again, you're the expert, we're the outsiders. I think the right of the bat for our viewers, we're very much interested in knowing how would you define or what is the proper interpretation of oligarchs at this moment? And the second is, what is the direct relationship between oligarchs and the so-called elites or so-called, this wealthies or, the top donors and whatever you want to call it. So let's get to those two questions right away. Your thoughts?
Okay, well, they're really two sides of the same question, right? Because oligarchs comes into vogue as a term in the 1990s when we apply it to Russia. Collapse of the Soviet Union happens. There's all of these kind of schemes from the managers, from privatization, from selling shares, kind of vouchers, by which people get rich. However, these things only happen because of political connections, whether they were insiders, like the managerial privatizations, which started under Gorbachev, or they knew people afterwards and were able to kind of buy up vouchers cheaply and things like this. So when we talk about oligarchs, it kind of comes from oligopoly, and then you've got just a few kind of people who have a dominant market position. The oligarchs are people who get rich. They're businessmen. I mean, there really weren't any businesswomen. But they only did it because they had political inside knowledge or that they knew people that they were able to kind of leverage these connections. When we think about oligarchs, that's what we're thinking about. These people then kind of took the money that they had and used it to kind of buy influence to continue their political connections. Now, in Russia, and this is where we kind of go off script a little bit, in Russia, there was, at least in the 1990s, this implicit acknowledgement that you can keep your economic wealth, you can keep your power, but don't meddle in politics and you'll be fine. This kind of thing has happened, in many, many countries around the world. Happened in Kazakhstan, for example. You can be rich, you can get rich because of your connections, but don't even think about entering the political arena. Now it started to change in the sense that the oligarchs are not necessarily people who have made money through the market and are looking to ingratiate themselves more so with kind of existing political leaders, but those people who are making money specifically because they have ingratiated themselves with political leaders. So in the 90s, we had oligarchs that came about through politically connected, possibly shady means, who then were kind of overthrown when Putin came to power. Today, we have oligarchs who are rich only because of Putin.
Dr. Hartwell, let's go to your article right away. Again, there's so much information to be covered, but I want to break it down little by little. This is something that you wrote in the article, and I quote, "Powerful and independent economic actors then become targets because their power prevents complete authoritarian consolidation." We know that today, when we look at these political games, not only in the US, but also outside the US arena, again, it's mind-boggling to see how the elites or how those rich people continue to rake the benefits and the wealth. There's no limits. But on the other hand, I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Hartwell, they are concerned that they stood out too much. Or perhaps they are concerned that they become, air quote, target for any other reason. See, this is something that I would say from this economic perspective, in the middle or even perhaps the middle lower class, there's something that we don't quite understand is why are they concerned of being the target at this moment? They have already made a fame or reputation based on their wealth and based on anything that they can put their fingers on. But becoming a target, why is that concerning? And also, when we look at, again, going back to the word relationship, we look at the relationship between the political actors and also look at all those people. Why is that a problem? Your thoughts?
Well, politics always dominates over economics. I'm an economist. For the past 30 years, I've spent advising governments around the world. And guess what? They still do bad policies, right? I'm always going to have a job advising governments because they're always going to do stupid things. So politics always kind of takes precedence over economics. That's kind of the first point here. But in terms of why they become targets, it's right there in the quote that you wrote, in the word consolidation. And I think that was my co-author's Professor Tricia Olson's word, because it's big with political scientists. We talk about what is happening today, kind of, but also with Russia in terms of the oligarchy, in this framework of what we call authoritarian state capitalism, where you basically have authoritarian political system and an economic system that's being run for the benefit of the existing elite. But it's not institutionalized. It's not like monarchies in the 19th century. Tsarist Russia is a great example. So the elites are trying to remain elites. And the way that they're trying to do that is by consolidating economic power. Now, the point that we were making about this kind of consolidation is that so long as there are economic actors, powerful, independent economic actors who are not dependent on the political class, their veto points, their other poles of power, they need to be eliminated if you're going to be able to kind of have this institutionalization. And that is where you get targets. I've written other things over the past year or two with another co-author of mine, Tim Deviney at the University of Manchester, where we talked about the dark side of lobbying, the dark side of corporate political activities, and that you get benefits, but you also get obligations, right? The politicians want you to do this, that, or the other thing. When you have a more authoritarian political spectrum, these obligations become more binding and they become more threatening. So if you have gotten money, even perfectly legally, if you've just made a great product and you've worked your way through the system, if you're seen as being disloyal to the regime, it makes you a target. So maybe at that point, you want to, prove your bona fides. You want to stand with the regime, or at least be seen to not be contradicting contradicting the regime, even if it's not institutionalized, because, things could go south very, very quickly.
Well, Dr. Hartwell, again, for our listeners, let's bring something more tangible into our conversation. Look at what's happening right now. As I mentioned in the intro, the whole world continued to follow the war between US and Iran at this moment. And of course, that you, Dr. Hartwell, you have a background in business policy, and also you are the expert in international business policy and also the relative field. But when we look at the current uncertainty, or look at this, however we want to sugarcoat the language or beautify the language, the war between US and Iran is not going anywhere at this moment. But people are still very concerned about what we called the global economic order. We're seeing this, of course, again, Dr. Hartwell, domestically speaking, we're seeing this gap between the top tier of the middle tier and the lower tier. But put in a greater way, people are saying, are we expecting a new global order or a new global economic order? Because simply put in a way, we can all understand it's, we don't want the oligarchs, we don't want the rich people to take away all the monies. We wanted the money to be distributed equally and fairly so everyone has the share. We know that could be a pipe dream, but we still want to get there one day. So, Dr. Hartwell, from your perspective, how do you think that this war between US and Iran at this moment can really be I want to be careful, either it's an opportunity to turn things around, or it could be a disturbance, can basically to reshape the global economic order. What do you think of that?
Well, the global economic order has already been reshaped. Global financial crisis did way more damage than we know. It's not just about dip in GDP. It's not just about kind of breaking off trends in growth. It really created kind of space for much more extreme voices that kind of come through, both on the left and the right. But it reversed the pendulum of globalization and liberalization that we had in the 1990s and the early 2000s. There's much, much more state intervention. Now, you kind of mentioned this idea of how can we kind of share the wealth? Well, if you want to use the Iran war or the new global order that we're moving towards as an example of that, well, I got news for you that's not happening, because we're just giving the state and we're giving oligarchs and we're giving politicians and leaders more power to then be able to dispense the spoils the way they want. And guess what? They don't dispense it to the poor. They don't dispense it to the middle class. They dispense it to their cronies. And that's the big problem that we see with authoritarian state capitalism. I think the US-Iran war right now is very symptomatic of this new global economic order, which is not predicated on kind of universal truths like the right to commerce, the right to move, right, capital and labor. It's predicated on transactions, transactionalism. That's what Trump has really kind of brought to the fore, something that Russia has always done, something that China has always done, something that India has always done. You could call it kind of the brickification of the world, in that Trump is now thinking about how can I get benefit from economic might this way, and this way. You see it in the Iran war with kind of the market movements that come around Trump's announcement, right? If oil is going to fly up or if oil is going to fly down, somebody's making money off of this. And it's not you or me, right? It's other people who are politically connected. So if you're worried about inequality, this is the exact wrong way to go about it. And the funny thing is that, I think the Islamic Republic of Iran has been a terrorist supporting soar in the world since 1979. So Trump might actually be doing something right for the wrong reasons, but he's doing it poorly. And it's entrenching this other kind of order. What could be something that would be good, especially for the Iranian people, is now turning into this, like you said, this kind of, it's a consolidation of the new global economic order. So I know I'm an economist. It's the dismal scientist. I'm a pessimist by nature anyway. But this one I just look at and I shake my head and think it could be going this way, but instead gone that way.
Well, I mean, Dr. Hartwell, at this moment, there's no tell. Again, as you mentioned before, there's no way that we can predict which direction the war is going to head. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we are all anticipating a practical and feasible, tangible solutions. Because again, we're looking at not only we look at this oil prices, this energy prices, but also, I want to add one more element to this, and also want to get your quick comments before we go back to the article. It's about food security. Because right now we're looking at the debate or the controversy on the Strait of Hormuz, and we know that on one hand, President Trump has not been very happy or satisfied regarding this partnership. And he called for help and he asked for help from other allies and friends, but sorry to say that he was rather disappointed. But on the other hand, we're also looking at this vulnerability of the food security. So Dr. Hartwell, again, you as economist and you're an expert in this international business management perspective, how do you think that such a chaos or such uncertainty can really create opportunities for bigger dialogues, for even further conversations? Because we know that food has to be the priority for the world. But right now, because this conflict, because the war, this vulnerable region for the food security is becoming more concerning. I want to know what your take on that.
Well, I think there's less of a worry of food security when we're talking about kind of Iran and the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, the big shock to food security in the world is happening because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, when we saw wild commodity swings, especially since we've got, 65% of the world's grain is coming from the Black Earth regions of Russia and Ukraine, and these are the ones that are, most directly affected by the invasion. And I think that, Russia's invasion of Ukraine was really kind of the signal that we don't have any more faraway places of which we know little and which concern us very little. Because economically, something happens in the eastern regions of Ukraine, and it is affecting the world. I mean, we talk about energy specifically when it comes to kind of the uncertainty around the Iran war, around the Straits of Hormuz. But I think, that is really being priced into assets rather than being into food security, unless you're looking at production of food. Again, this is going to be more regionally based in Asia. Granted, that is where 66% of the world's population is, than it is going to be in Europe and Africa and in the United States, maybe a bit more in terms of Europe. So, I mean, for food security, we've already had that shock. This is just kind of energy security that is being overlaid on top of that. And again, previous to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we didn't pay enough attention to kind of securing the supply chains. COVID did a big number on supply chains and let us know, oh my God, something's wrong here. But we didn't pay enough attention, especially in kind of agricultural and food supply chains. Now we have this shock on kind of the energy supply chains, and everything we know goes out the window. We haven't had a lot of good policy before this that's prepared for it. You mentioned opportunities. Maybe this is an opportunity to rethink how we do energy, much like COVID gave us a chance to rethink how we do manufacturing. But again, I worry it's going to only create an opportunity for the most extreme voices and those who are most in favor of intervention to kind of come to the fore, and they're not going to solve anything.
Dr. Hartwell, I have two more questions before letting you go. Now, let's talk about another portion of the article. It's called American Oligarchy. In the article you wrote, the United States is not Russia, Turkey, or Saudi Arabia. I mean, thank goodness. But as a variety of civil society organizations and democracy scholars have noted, it is experiencing steady democratic backsliding, a process marked by steep political polarization. We know that, Dr. Hartwell, it's not something that new that we talk about political polarization. But meanwhile, prior to have the interview with you, I dig a little bit deeper, and more experts believe that because of what's happening in the political polarization on top of the war between US and Iran, the war in Ukraine, that really provide a plethora of advantages to countries like China. So in other words, China is paying closer attention to what's happening right now. It's not a bench player. China want to be more actively involved in the process, or hopefully can be a mediator, God willing. So, Dr. Hartwell, from your perspective, political polarization or economic polarization, however we want to put it, do you think that such tendency or such situation actually provide opportunities or even advantages to countries like China? Energy, food, resources, whatever that is. So what is your assessment on that?
Well, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, if you think of this as kind of some geopolitical grand chess match, then yes, anything that kind of divides your enemy is going to rebound to your benefit. In the United States, political polarization really has gotten very, very bad. I would say, well, we've always been kind of idiosyncratic with our polarization in the United States. But I mean, it got really bad under George W. Bush, but I think Obama was really the kind of catalyst that created the polarization that you see today, which makes it much more difficult to kind of find any kind of centrist. Now both parties are just playing to their bases, which is very, very disappointing. And again, as I said, it allows for kind of extremism, for these voices to become the loudest and to really kind of pull the parties apart. I just got back from a trip to the United States, and living in Europe as an American, everybody has an opinion on Trump. I get asked by cab drivers, I get asked by students, what do you think about Trump? What do you think Trump's going to do next? I'm like, I don't know. Trump doesn't know. He wakes up in the morning and makes up his mind then. How am I supposed to know? I haven't lived in the U.S. for 20 years, so I don't know that answer. But actually being an American back in the United States, you could see the polarization. You can't talk about anything without having it be political. And in Europe and elsewhere in the world, you see it's Trump, 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 and all the Republicans are doing this. When you're back in the United States, you see that the Democrats have gone far, far to the left. And The Economist had a graph on this a couple of years ago. It was the FT that kind of showed how far left the Democrats have become. The Republicans have stayed, basically where they were, and how far left the Democrats have become. The polarization is happening on both sides. A disunited States of America obviously serves America's enemies. It serves countries that would set themselves up in opposition to the United States. Russia has played this playbook for years and has been actively stoking it through disinformation, misinformation, to kind of subvert any support for Ukraine, but also, again, to sow division within NATO, within the United States. China, of course, benefits from this. If it sets itself up as this other pole in terms of the world, and face it, Russia's a junior partner to China because of China's economic might, that this only serves China in the short term. In the long term, is it good for China to have a United States that's polarized, knowing that the way the American voters are, we can swing back and forth at any minute, that tomorrow morning we could wake up and be the most anti-China country on the planet? I don't know if this is a strategic play in the long run. It's a tactical play, but I don't know if it's strategic.
Well, Dr. Hartwell, I know your time is very precious. I do want to wrap up our conversation by asking you the last question. 2026, it's standing on the crossroads from this political standpoint. Midterm election is coming up. And also, right now in both parties, people are eyeing for this 2028 presidential election. We know that it's still far out there, but people already gear up for many efforts. And also in your article, you mentioned, for example, the Amazon CEO, Jeff Bezos, and Meta CEO, Mark Zuckerberg. The list can go on and on and on. We wanted the game to be played fairly. And we're hoping that this nation can be restored with stability and also trust. And of course, that America this year is about to celebrate the 250th anniversary of independence. It's going to be a milestone. So my last question to you, Dr. Hartwell, is how can we solve it? I'm not asking a genie in the box solution, but I'm asking something that we can restore the sanity and to understand that those oligarchs are not going anywhere, but we also need to have check and balance in order to understand the sanity of the structure and also the foundation of our political system. Your final thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. You know, all the stuff on the U.S. was written by my co-author, Tricia Olson, who's a political scientist and studies this a lot more than me. But as I said, I'm an institutional economist, and you hit it at the end, the checks and balances. It's all about kind of the guardrails. We talk about authoritarian state capitalism as being this uneasy equilibrium. The United States is not authoritarian yet, and I say yet. The reason being is because there are these guardrails. We have independent institutions. The problem is that when you get to authoritarian state capitalism, you have an elite that tries to subvert the institutions for their own good. It happened in Poland with the Law and Justice Party, kind of working on the Constitutional Tribunal. You saw it in Hungary under Orban. It's not that to that advanced stage in the United States, and we have independent bulwarks against kind of the centralization of power. There's going to be midterm elections. You mentioned that. Democrats probably going to take back the House. You're going to have gridlock for 2 years. Don't know what's going to happen in 2028. No one else does. You have an independent Supreme Court. It's got a Republican majority, but their fidelity is to the Constitution, not to Trump. So they also provide speed bumps. Whether or not you kind of keep the democracy out, you keep the democracy in and the authoritarians out is the only way in which you can do this. Commitment to rule of law, no matter which way the law goes. And that's the problem that we've seen in the United States, why the polarization is. Everyone has become so tribal that we see things happening. Eroding of institutions is okay from either the left or the right, so long as it benefits my tribe. We stay away from that, and then we should be good.
Well, again, Dr. Hartwell, it's such a genuine and sincere reminder for all of us to understand that. Again, ladies and gentlemen, it's such an honor to speak to Dr. Christopher Hartwell. Professor Hartwell is a professor of international business policy and head of the International Management Institute at the Zurich University of Applied Sciences School of Management and Law. And I strongly encourage everyone go online to check out Dr. Hartwell's article, The Disposable Oligarchs: Why Wealthy Elites Come to Regret Their Bargains with Authoritarians. Well, again, Dr. Hartwell, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and we'd love to have you back on the show as we continue to pay attention to the global affairs. So thank you so much for doing this.